I don't know.
Miley Cyrus giving a little song to demolition. So we thank her for that. And I think during today's presentations, I have found that I have changed my narrative 15 times. And so you'll have to bear with me as I go through my slides, because they're not what I'm thinking about right now. I will let you know that I did work at Pennington's studio when I was a student, so a few years ago. And therefore, one of the things that surprised me today was hearing that buildings over 60 aren't worth looking at. That's kind of my area. So I think buildings over 60 years old, I think anyone in Europe would contest that that's still a new building. And I have been asked to represent a group of people, architects, artists, writers, historians, and heritage architects. And we got together in a very ad hoc manner to present ourselves as the Mod Squad, which was kind of fun, but not really. And this isn't working. Where do I?
Stop. Just hit it one more time.
Again? That helps. There. Oh, there she is again. So what we're looking at here is the actual demolition of one of Mr. Bennington's schools at Regent Park. The people of Regent Park did not want it torn down, as they did not want all of their homes torn down, but somehow that didn't come as an interest to most of the politicians and the people who have made a lot of money off the Regent Park process. But you can see what we've lost. I mean, this picture here shows you what is being demolished right at the time. And the building that replaces it is completely uninteresting to me. Okay, here's the Mod Squad. This was our theme. This got us going. It got us pumped up. And this late in the day, it might help.
Sorry.
And this is the reason we got involved in it. And we tried very hard to present our case to all the powers that be, but no one would take us up on it, and no one would entertain a meeting with us, a face-to-face meeting. We sent a lot of emails, we talked about things, but we never got a face-to-face with anyone. Sorry, I'm doing it wrong again. And this is not surprising. I mean, even this is about Rem Koolhaas's Netherlands Dance Theatre, which was torn down recently, and even Rem Koolhaas didn't know about it in advance. And one of the problems with the Davisville site is that the architectural and heritage community did not know about it. I know we've heard today there was all kinds of publications about it, but it's surprising that most of us who read at least 2 newspapers a day had not heard about this until it was 5 years along in the process. And this came out in the Village Post, which says that it's condominiums which are to blame for the school coming down, which is just another case of lack of knowledge about what's going on in the neighborhood. The condominiums had nothing whatsoever to do with the demolition of the school, which is not demolished yet, but But it's a lack of communication when even our printed media gives us this kind of news. It's incorrect. And the process that we've gone through so far is the parents and students, the classrooms are too small and they're not up to date with IT, all of which is totally true. The Toronto School Board trustees are elected by parents, so therefore the trustees have a relationship with the parents which is not entirely open to the rest of the community, including architectural and heritage communities, because our interests are not equal to votes. The Ratepayers Association don't like the building, period. The people who live on Millwood do not like the building. They think it's ugly, and they would rather have a park, which of course is going to improve their resale values. And the hub, which is the most interesting part to me anyway, is that it has confused the issue so dramatically that it's no longer about the school, it's whether or not the community gets a community center that is paid for equally by I understand, the city, and it is a programmatic push from the province. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the school board. And again, this is the thing about getting votes. And interestingly, there has never been a consultation process that was brought forward. And I don't understand that either, because the City of Toronto has a heritage group within it, and that heritage group was never consulted about the school. The city councillor is a politician. He has no architectural or heritage consultation, nor does he have the knowledge about those two things. So he has to depend on the people around him who also are not that educated about the architectural and heritage considerations. The concerned citizens, such as Mod Squad and Ryerson and so on, we are all told that we're too late. I don't know why the school is still standing, so I'm not sure why we're too late. And then the political channels have been very slow. There's no accountability that I can see. And there is a councillors club whereby the councillor of each area of Toronto takes care of their area, and other councillors will not vote against that person. Even though if you reach out to other councillors outside of the area, they're sympathetic, but they won't vote against a councillor in a certain area. So it's, and now that we don't have the OMB, there's nobody to go to. You're stuck with the councillor in the area and their opinion. So when we went for heritage, it was deferred by Josh Mallow, and that means certain death for stopping the demolition of the project, which other councillors had felt that it was a good idea, but they will not vote against a fellow councillor. So for us, and for me in particular, we did get proposed heritage status from the Toronto Preservation Board, and then it was obviously turned down at the Toronto and East York Community Council, which is which is a group on council, and that's where the councillors of each ward make their position known. And for us, it was a no. These are comments which came out in 2015. Shelley Laskin, who is still the trustee of the area, stated that she was over the moon about the funding for Davisville, which is second worst school in the board as far as being prohibitive to repair. I have still not been able to get that report, so I don't know where it comes from or how we keep banding about $12 million, but but the restoration, the addition, reuse, none of these were given any weight in terms of how to use the money that was recently given to them. The TDSB has seemed roughly an acre of surplus to its needs. And this was also in the 2015 article. So if they have an acre of surplus, that surplus is enormous. We heard this morning that 3.8 acres is a very small site. Well, in Midtown Toronto, that's enormous. So the building of a new school in this area and reusing this or selling the existing building was not given any consideration whatsoever. There was no dialogue about that. And Josh was very keen on the hub, which is still kind of, it's a switch and bait. You're going to get a hub, so don't worry about tearing down a building. The two are not related. They are two separate programs. And when they were given the money, I think we all thought it was for restoration of one of the best expressions of mid-century modern architecture in Ontario, or in Toronto, but that's not the case. And I think all of these points are pretty straightforward, and you've heard them all today. But programming is not architecture. Having a bigger room or having IT, etc., this is not an architectural discussion. An architectural discussion is about vision, which is what we had in the previous buildings. So all we get is an aggregate of program spaces, and you heard this morning from the parent group that the buildings that are replacing the old buildings are actually quite atrocious, which is true because they are an aggregate of spaces and they're little boxes. So it's significant that this building at Davisville is part of a larger group, and you've heard that discussion today as well. The ones at the top are still extant, but I would say the one on Spadina is in very rough shape, and if it's not taken care of very quickly, it's going to go the same way as Davisville, because it's a large site. I think the University of Toronto is looking at it. There's a lot of interest in that area, so it's very much in peril. And these at the bottom are the ones that have been torn down, but Davisville is still standing, so I don't think we have to talk about it in terms of it being gone, which is what we're doing. I don't know why we're taking that attitude on, or why we're not saying it's not going to be torn down if we have some kind of interest in it. But what we did as a group is we put together 3 different models for what would make some kind of economic sense to the school board while retaining the building. And I'm just going to go through 2 of the urban design sketches that we did. And what we were looking at in this particular one was having a way of getting through the project and trying to relate the buildings and the property to the 2 different neighborhoods. There's the Millwood neighborhood on top, which is a very expensive neighborhood, and then you have the high-rise housing on the bottom. So we thought that it would be a good thing to try and connect those 2 neighborhoods, leaving the building and then building both the hub and the new school, and all of these drawings take into account the program areas that the school board is working with. So this is the site. There's the building as it is. The green area is parkland and school land. The front piece is where the new school and the hub would go. This is the hub that we would add, the new school, and it builds up 1 story at a time. I don't know why. Until you get something like this, which is fairly modest. It gives them all the program areas they want. There is a connection with the community, and there are some spaces for the community, including a new childcare center. And this next one is looking at taking the building itself, making the connection between the two streets, but keeping an open throughway on the left-hand side. You see that's the parking for the buildings on Yonge Street. So this is a different view, and this is building up. The hub first, the new school, additions to it, and then you end up with an extremely large area for park and playground area. You end up with a public walkway through the site, and you have the same program area that you were looking for. I mean, we have, in all of these, we have shown underground parking, although that's something that I think we could argue against. You're in the middle of the city, there is more than adequate public transit. We don't understand why a private or a public school requires underground parking. It's an extraordinary expense, and it's not parking that's for the public or anyone, it's parking for the staff. And I don't know of any other corporation or group that is going to provide underground parking for free to their staff. This is yet another iteration of the project. So next steps, start the process now, as you've heard today, and identify the buildings that are in jeopardy. And they have and I think the other point to make is that Davisville is still standing, so we don't need to talk about it as though it's a done deal, because it's not necessarily a done deal. You can still present this information to anyone who's going to listen, which aren't many, but I think that we have to make the effort not to give up on it right now. Thank you.